What's going on, everybody? My name is John. You already know what it's going to be. It's going down in a few more seconds. Relentlessly Real Podcast. Let's go.
What's up, fam? It's your boy, Dr. Mike, and it's almost that time to get real, raw, and relatable. Looking forward to talking to y'all soon. Peace.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Terrence. Welcome back to another season of Relentlessly Real Podcast. So excited to have you all back. We got a lot of great stuff. Check us out.
You're now listening to The Real.
Man, I appreciate them dudes for talking about
The Raw.
Wait, they were talking about
The Relatable.
That's exactly what I've been going through.
The Relentlessly Real Podcast.
What's going on? What's going on, everybody? Welcome, welcome, world. Welcome.
Yo.
We are here. We're back again for another amazing episode of the Relentlessly Real Podcast, where we discuss real, raw, and relatable topics. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. We're going to kick this off with a bunch of introductions because we have a bunch of young ladies here on the podcast, along with the other three black men. And here we go. So my name is John.
My name's Mike.
And as always, I'm Terrence.
And you can start us off. Let's start with Dr. Tony. She's the easiest name for me to say, Dr. Tony. And Dr. Tony, can you just tell us a fun fact about yourself that maybe people don't know? Each person can do that, please.
All right. So, hey, everyone. I am Dr. Tony. Fun fact. I would say most people do not know that I am in a van club. I'm a co-founder of a van club.
What's a van club?
So like an auto club, you know, people have motorcycle clubs and everything. So yeah, vanners, we go camping together, have a good time together, but I co-founded one.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Really cool. Yeah. Whoever wants to go next, doesn't matter.
Okay, well, I am Edwina. Hello, everyone. And fun fact about me, well, my girls might know this, but you guys don't know this, that I am a Liberian girl.
Got it. Whoever's next, jump in.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nafisa, and a fun fact about me that a lot of people don't know is that I studied French from kindergarten through 12th grade.
All right.
Nice. Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Angie, and I am a recent self-taught balloon artist.
Wow.
Oh,
that
cool.
is a fun fact. That's unexpected.
I feel like you should have brought a balloon.
Actually, it's not too late, Terrence. Go run right now and go get a balloon and make one real quick. No,
Make an Avenger.
Thank you guys so much. All you young ladies, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. We have been talking about a topic that we're going to hop into a little bit later, and we're excited to have some perspectives that are not our own. All right, we have been talking about this topic of kind of gender and the roles and what men do versus what women do, and we've been expressing our views over and over and over again. However, this time today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have views from some wonderful co-hosts, and it's going to go down in just a bit. So stay tuned. As always, guys, we would love for you to say good morning, happy Saturday, whatever you want to say. We want to engage with you and make sure we're talking to you throughout this podcast. I have the question of the day today. Are you ready? Are you ready? Never ready. Here we go. Question of the day is this. Would you rather eat after somebody you don't know or eat something off of the floor?
Off the floor.
And you got to say why.
I don't know, because people are just nasty. Like, I don't know where your mouth been. At least the floor, if I could do like the 5-6 second rule.
Okay. Floor.
I'm thinking of saliva. You could have just had some bodily fluids in your mouth. I'm good. I'm going to do the floor.
And this is a great topic after what we were talking about before.
A cupcake? Yeah. Could have been a cupcake.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
A laced cupcake. You know.
We won't talk about that on this. We have children to listen to. Okay, so we won't keep that off. But, all right. So anybody else on this topic?
You know what? I'm gonna have to say after somebody else. I cannot think about eating off the floor unless it's my own floor, right? Because I think about folks, walking through the mud and it's like animal feces and stuff on the bottom of their shoes.
Oh, ew, yeah.
At least like if somebody took a bite out of something, what's left, I'm hoping they didn't like put it in their mouth and spit it back out. But like off the floor, yeah, that's E. coli and all kinds of staphylococcus, all that stuff.
Oh goodness!
I can't
All
do
right.
it.
Not if you pick it up real fast.
Well, no.
5 second rule.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
I
so
mean, I was
caveat. Do we get the chance to choose who the person is? Like, does it
Absolutely
matter who the
not.
person
Mike
is?
always,
Absolutely not.
Mike is always adding.
Exactly. This is what we
Yeah,
don't
Mike,
do.
that's a good question because then I would change.
No,
no, that's
no,
really good. That's really
No.
good.
I eat after my wife, or
hilarious. Anyone else on this topic?
I'm thinking, because I'm always the person like, what floor are we talking about, and like who are we talking about? So like, is this like outside floor or in my house floor? Like, which one is it?
Oh, my
But I think I
goodness.
would go after somebody because especially if I'm able to see the person eat first, so that I can know what I'm dealing with, and then I can go after the person. But when we talk about
Y'all
floor,
adding all these scenarios.
Being extra.
yeah,
Hilarious.
I need like
The
the whole
scenarios
picture.
matter.
Scenarios
Yes.
matter. Yes, right.
yeah, they do. They do.
Angie, you want to add to this one? I don't know, Angie. Can you hear me? She might not be able to hear me. All right. What about you, Mike Terrence?
I'm gonna do the floor, like my wood floors. I don't wear shoes in my house, so yeah, I'm gonna eat on the floor.
You off the floor. T.
Yeah, I'm
5 second rule.
gonna pick the floor. I'm gonna pick the floor. Like it's just, I'm with Jeremiah. I trust floor more than people.
That's
Exactly.
that's disgusting. Y'all are just that's ridiculous.
No, it's like
Right.
because you don't know that you don't know what kind of like with dental hygiene they have.
Mhm.
Like that's the
Herpes.
unknown. If it's the floor, okay, it's the floor. I already know. It's like I just know, but I don't know you.
Okay,
with the
but
floor.
Terrence,
It's the floor. yo.
the floor is also you don't know what people did on the floor. Dogs, people.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right, trash.
You gotta eat after
You
R.
guys
Kelly.
at-
You have
huh?
to eat a meal after R. Kelly.
After R. Kelly.
Mr. RP on you. Now what you doing? Now what you doing?
Okay, so you presented a different scenario.
No,
in
I
which-
didn't. I just said
He's a person.
he's a person.
Oh, so we're just backing up. We're backing up, Terrence, too, on top of that. Okay, all right. Well,
You
all
pick
right.
the
Well, maybe
person.
y'all are right. Either way, it is risky. I agree with Renee. Either way, you're taking a huge chance. I would probably opt to eat after somebody. I think that's. I hate to say it after hearing all y'all responses, but I think I would want to eat after somebody. I don't know. I wouldn't say R. Kelly, but I want to eat after somebody. I think that's a disgusting scenario. Either way, I just wanted to get an idea of where you guys are thinking. Anybody else on that topic?
Enjoy that chocolate factory, okay?
I
Enjoy
cannot.
it.
No.
I cannot. I'm done. All right, listen. You guys know how we do it. Every time we're gonna have Terrence. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Thanos was right. That's
right.
his name for today. Thanos
right.
was right. We're gonna have him go ahead and hop into the NextFlick or chill. So go ahead, Thanos.
Okay, so I have been waiting actually weeks to talk about this. What I am currently watching because I wanted it to get really really good, and it did. We gotta talk about Euphoria. If you have not seen Euphoria, it's now currently on season 2. It's on HBO Max or HBO. It streams Sunday, if I'm correct, at 9:00. It is just an utterly amazing show. One of the great things about this show is number one is the main star is Zendaya, and at 25 years of age, I would have to say Zendaya has proven to be probably one of the best talents there is on the screen, big screen, small screen, so diverse. And if no matter what if you've seen Malcolm and Marie, you've seen her in Spider-Man, you've seen her with stuff she's done. There's nothing like her work in Euphoria. It's from the beginning to the end. Zendaya is giving you every single thing in her performance. The other great thing about this show, I think, is so cool, is that it's not just that the show features her, but every single character in the show gets their own their light, their time to shine, and it's amazing acting. And so season 2, I will say it's a little heavy on the nudity. I totally get that, but the payoff with Zendaya's acting is worth every hour. It's one of those shows that you pretty much. I wish it was on Netflix so I could just get through it because I wait every Sunday for it to come on at 9:00. I literally would have turned on Super Bowl to watch this show if it came out at 9 o'clock. It's really, really, really good. I don't know if anybody else had a chance to see it. Let me know your thoughts. Like anybody else, and everybody in the comment section, if you've seen like Euphoria, what do you think about it? Because I know it's a hit or miss with some people. It's amazing to me.
It is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's a good show. I've only gotten up to maybe episode 4 of season 1, and from those episodes alone, like there are like certain triggers in there, like triggers related to like things that I've experienced back in high school, like for example, like being at a party and like bullies and stuff like that, people picking on the new guy, that sort of thing, or even but besides that, like the thought of things happening to my kids, like that's the stuff that's triggering to me. And I'm like, dang, like, kids real life be experiencing stuff out here. Just from like talking to teenagers about different type of stuff alone, not to, I guess, to the extreme of certain things that happen in the episode, but certain stuff, yeah, it does happen. So it's just, overall, it is a good show. Like you said, Terrence, like the acting from not just Zendaya, but like from other actors too, they're really good. They're doing their thing.
Really good. The whole cast is really, really good. Really, really good.
I guess I just can't believe that all that stuff happens at that age. What age is she supposed to be in there?
They're high school, and you got to remember that it's also California. So sometimes we got to take ourselves out of like our normal urban, like our type of urban setting. It takes place in a whole in the West Coast, and that's a whole different lifestyle than what we see over here. And so I've seen that feedback too, like that some of the stuff happens. I mean, as an educator, I can tell you that some of that stuff actually is happening. Maybe it's not to that extreme in the show. But like just to give people like a quick thing, the show is not that's a topic, but the main thing, Zendaya is the star, and it's just about a teenager who struggles with substance abuse. I mean, she is addicted to drugs, hardcore drugs, and it's about the impact it has on her parents, her sister, her community, her friends, and they just show you everything that their friends are going through in the midst of her dealing with. Which is authentic, and the director wanted it like that because he also dealt with substance abuse. So he's kind of shown like a lens on it, the impact of substance abuse, and then how these people still need to have some empathy and some and sympathy for these people. Yeah. And so it's just a good show,
I guess. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm good. So
yeah, I mean, it's too heavy for me. I'm not there, and I have 2 girls. I don't know if any of y'all know that, but I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. I'm not ready for anything related to children of my young girls having to deal with any of those type of things. So I don't know. I don't want to be triggered by the time. I mean, they're 4 now. I won't be yelling at them like, "Don't you do that?" And I'm like, "It's too early." Like they're 4.
So. It is the one. Is it Aldoris? She made a good comment how like she successfully shredded like the kid star stigma because she has like she deserves an Emmy for sure. Like it's just so raw and authentic. Like she just embodies that character. And I think everybody is amazing. Like Terrence said, equally. It is a little heavy, so you might need to balance it with like something funny. Yeah, it's very heavy to watch. To balance it out.
Episodes, a lot of nudity. Watch 2 or 3, and then watch something else.
I'm gonna watch Encanto, like watch Encanto, and then watch that again.
Exactly. You gotta balance.
There you go.
Yeah, I can't see it, but whatever. I guess. Terrence, that's your Netflix and chill for today.
Watch if you're not watching it, watch it. I'm telling you. Watch it.
She gets an Emmy. Doris, apparently she's a fan. I don't know whatever the case.
Yeah, she already got an Emmy. She's gonna get another one. She's going to get another one.
She absolutely deserves it.
Okay, yeah. I'll check it out from that standpoint in the morning. I think we talked about watching TV at night and how triggering that is.
Maybe not Sunday morning.
Yeah, not Sunday morning. I'm gonna go ahead and go to church, and then I'm gonna go. I'll check it out after that. So if you guys have been following us for the past couple of weeks, we've been having some great dialogue about relationships and ownership and dating and in marriage. And so as we had spoken with our other new co-host for today about it, we wanted to get the viewpoints of some women. We have been giving our viewpoints for the past couple of weeks, and we were just like, man, we all agree, but maybe women don't agree with us. So we wanted to bring some women on here to talk about the topics as a community. And so this is what we're going to do today. We're going to actually start off with a video that we have not shown yet. Previously, when we had this conversation, we started with another video that kind of got the conversation started. But this one kind of goes to the same level of the things that we were already talking about, and hopefully it engages where we were, and we can learn some new things about perspective today from women, some new women. All right, so we're excited. Here we go. Let's check this out.
Ladies, we don't know how to communicate. What we consider to be effective communication is not. That is not effective communication. That's why we have to talk about the same thing over and over and over and over again with our man, because we don't know how to communicate. We do horrible at that. So let me go through some of the things that we do that we don't know we do. We do it. We're where we do it, but we don't know that that's the reason why our communication is ineffective. First thing we do, ladies, we go into the conversation with an assumption. Yes, we do. We already know what we know. And even if that man tell us something different, don't matter, because we already said in our head that it's what it is. And we right. So yeah, first thing we do wrong is we go into the conversation with our spouse, with our mate, with an assumption. Now, the next thing that we do, this is something we do, and we will say it's because the person that we're having that conversation with is not hearing us, right? We get overly emotional. We make sure that they understand we need them to feel our hurt, our anger, our pain. And that's all that's focused on. Everything else that we say out of our mouth, once we have gotten angry, hurt, and are full of pain, that's all that person hear. So even if we're making some points, all they hear is that pain, that anger, that frustration. Yeah, takes away from it. The third thing that we do when we are trying to effectively communicate, ladies, we ain't thought about nothing about that man. We did it. We didn't put ourselves in their shoes, in their position. We are only thinking about us. And the only thing that matters is that we happy and that we satisfied. We don't care nothing about what he doing and what he got going on. And we don't care. Yeah. So this is part one of It's Mrs. We call it that effective communication course. Yeah. So 3 things that we do terribly wrong, ladies. And we need to get that together. All right. I'm going to come back with a part 2 in a minute. All right. Give me a second.
All right, so we had a I already see next rolling. I already see
wait,
eyes rolling.
John, I just want to say something. Edwina was smiling the whole time, which already lets me know.
Burn it up.
So I'm going to sit back and I'm going to allow the ladies to take the show over from here. What I want to say is just a quick question. Do you agree? Do you not agree with said video? Whoever wants to go first.
Let me just say this, because I was highly triggered. I want to say this, right? Well, first I'm going to say I think that she made some great points, right? But I think what honestly does, I think, bother me sometimes when I see videos like that is it continues to perpetuate the fact that the burden solely rests on women, right? So when she was talking about the fact that, we get overly emotional, like, why is it that there's this expectation that our range of humanity is like diminished, right? Why is it that we cannot be those emotional beings? And I think that what we need to, thank you, Kalita, what we need to be, promoting is emotional intelligence all around, right? So when I think about true partnership, because she started out the video talking about, when you're talking to your spouse or your partner, but we can't just use those words and not have the expectation that folks are going to step into those roles. So what does it mean to be my partner? To be my partner, what it means is that if I'm coming to you and I am being my full human self, so I am emotional in this moment. And so you are getting to see the impact, right? Versus your intention, you're getting to see the impact on me as someone you supposedly love. I don't think that that's problematic. And I think that we need to stop telling women that that is problematic for the same reason that we need to stop telling men that they shouldn't show up in that way as well. You know what I mean? So I think that's the problem. I think that I have with messages around that is that it continues to perpetuate, lots of stereotypes around communication and around emotion that does not serve women and it does not serve men. It serves no one, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I have a hard time with people generalizing situations. It like really bothers me because when it's like when you're speaking for like don't speak for me. You don't know me, and yes, I'm a woman, and I don't that to the her three list the come in with an assumption is not like that's not accurate. And so I'm always like I can only speak from my perspective, and I never like say this is what us women or whatsoever. So that was what I found problematic about that, because I don't resonate, that I don't agree with what she was saying, because that's not how I go into any communication. And I feel like communication is a two-way street, so it's like how I'm coming into a conversation whatsoever, I'm expecting it to be, reciprocated. And so I don't know. I feel like she was saying it from like a one side, um, I don't know, like a one side conversation or something. So I don't know. It's just I was bothered. That's what I would say. I was bothered. What she was saying.
Yeah, I would actually have to agree with you there, Edwina, because I think it's very narrow-minded to kind of be like everybody has, or females have this preconceived notion when they enter a conversation. To be honest, anybody that's starting a conversation is walking into it with the intentions of sharing their point of view. How else do you start a conversation if you don't have a point of view on what you're even trying to discuss? So how would I come to my spouse or my, friend, my other, whoever's on the other side of the conversation with their viewpoint? I don't know their viewpoint yet. That's the whole reason we're having a discussion about it. So I think it's kind of like, wow, for her to be like, yeah, women come with this preconceived notion. No, I'm coming with my thoughts surrounding a topic. And now I am endeavoring to dialogue back and forth to see what your thoughts are on the topic. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you all said, and I don't know, it's just triggering for me. Like I felt like the overly emotional is just almost like like I just think of like gaslighting, and then it's also just like I feel like shrinking like our voice. Like are you supposed to go in and like walk on eggshell and not be passionate and be real and authentic about how you feel with your partner? Like if you are emotional in that moment, then you're emotional. That's how you feel. Like you can't tell someone how to feel in a situation. I do see how there could be value in maybe sometimes waiting to have a discussion because like your emotions are so elevated and heightened. So with age, I've learned that to not like to shelf something sometimes. Like I'm too mad. I'm a revisit this like in the morning or revisit it a little bit later. So I can see value in that, but I really do not. I just did not like how she worded that. Like we're just we just overly emotional. Like I'm really sick of that narrative too. Like I'm over that as far as with women. And I think somebody in the chat, a woman said like all women aren't emotional. Mm-hmm. And if we are emotional, there's a reason for that emotion. So I just felt like it's like invalidating someone's feelings and something they're passionate about, and I'm not here for that.
And the other thing, sis, for me, I think that the biggest issue is again that the burden falls on women. Right. And so, one thing that I'm noticing a lot here lately, and maybe it's just because I'm more present on social media, but there's a lot of us, especially Black and brown women, doing the work of misogynoir. That's the part that I think I'm kind of like tired of. It's a lot of us doing the work of telling women, especially Black and brown women, like how to show up. And, but there's not, so like in terms of, you're right, sis, I agree with you. I think that is very mature, virtually very emotionally mature and emotionally intelligent to have the wherewithal to think, I need to table this conversation until later. And the problem that I have with that is that onus, from my perspective, is more often than not placed on women. Right. So when we show up and we're quote unquote emotional or passionate, then there's this notion that we need to calm that down. And when men do it, they're passionate. When we do it, is, oh, she's this. We're all emotional beings. Like that's part of actually what makes us human. So that's why when I first started talking, I was talking about our range of humanity. I think that for women, too often, there's this push for us to narrow that range in ways that we can and should show up in relationships. I am someone who was separated, about to be divorced hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But I think about the impact or the role that communication has played in my former relationship and even other relationships. And from my experience, there's been this onus placed on me, especially as a Black woman, to show up differently, and this expectation that, well, no, you need to check that. But if I'm passionate, if I'm showing up fully and authentically, as long as I'm not disrespecting you, right, and I'm sharing with you the impact of your words and your actions, you should, if you love me and you care about me, that should be something that you welcome, right? It's something that you expect from me as well.
Absolutely.
I wasn't gonna talk. I told y'all we want to hear from
we
y'all
just
today. Like we
listening.
just listening. Like
I'm hearing y'all. I'm like, okay,
right, because we've had this conversation before, and you can see the women over here. Yes, sis, talk to them. Let them know.
And look, and we knew that was going to happen. We knew that was going to happen.
We see the energy, y'all. We see y'all your responses to it. My thing before we move on, if you guys all don't mind, just so we have a sense of perspective, where you are in terms of like, are you dating? Are you married? Are you separated, divorced, whatever? Like, just so we know what lens or vantage point you're speaking from and help us better understand. So Dr. Tony, you already said you were in the process of being divorced, I believe, right?
Yes.
All right. Everyone else, if you don't mind disclosing.
Sure. I'm divorced, so I'm currently single and I guess dibbling in the dating pool a little bit. Decided it doesn't have P in it.
Got it.
I'm married.
And I'm married as well.
All right, so married, divorced, and dibbling in a. You said dibbling in, I don't know, a pool. You said a pool.
The dating pool.
Oh, the dating pool. Okay, absolutely, yeah. So, was there any part of that video? Because I mean, I get what you're saying, and obviously, we always have to talk from a broad strokes approach, right? And I think we always often have to have that conversation. And I think no matter how we have this conversation, no one's going to be able to say the full breadth of everybody's experiences, right? So we get that, and we understand that, and but there are some things that are we're seeing surfacing in our own marriages, and we're seeing surfaces in other friends of ours that are men's marriages as well. So is there any part of the video that you thought was true, or there were elements or spaces of that you agree with?
Not exactly. And I say not exactly or like yes and no, because okay, I'll start by saying this. She is a contrarian in the sense that she'll say whatever is the opposite of the popular opinion for clickbait. You know what I mean? And I think that viral effect, I'm not even always convinced that like she believes what she's saying. So it's hard for me to get behind that. But in the general sense of like some of the things, she's not really wrong. I think where it goes left is that you're overgeneralizing it and putting it on just females as if males don't do it as well. Now, if females is her audience and who she wants to speak to and who she wants to address, then I guess I could get, why she would be, addressing us in that way. But it gets a little weird for me because things that she's saying can be true, but it's true of both sexes. It's not just something that females do, and it's not just something that men do. And I think that's the reason why this conversation can kind of go on for weeks and weeks and weeks, because we can unpack it from you guys' perspective, we can unpack it from our perspective, and then hearing each other's side of it is only going to bring up, as you can see, like the more things are going to just start coming to rabbit hat, for lack of a better term. So it's not that I don't really agree or disagree with what she's saying. I just think it's interesting that that's the perspective that she's choosing, and she's like riding that to the wheels fall off, as if what she's saying is not something that couldn't be said about everybody across the board. So that's just really interesting to me. And then it's like, I think she's falling victim to some of the things that she's even saying, because you're talking about communication and all these things that females allegedly have, but it's like she's coming to the table offering her opinion with a preconceived notion that people are going to be able to, you see what I'm saying? So it's like she's doing the exact same thing that she's accusing all females of doing. And it's like, sis, don't you see you're like a part of the problem you're trying to highlight? It's weird.
Yeah, I think I had a
I wanted to answer to put a question on John's question, because I think even with her doing it, she is doing broad strokes. So it's almost like if it doesn't apply to you, let it fly. She's trying to speak to the ones that it does apply to. Does it make sense? Which is why John's asked, do you think any part of what she's saying could be true? And so I like your answer, Angie. That's all I want to say.
I mean, I just felt like, I think just the way she worded it, like the generalization and the way she was saying, like, ladies, I'm talking to you, and women, even though it's broad strokes, it's like I'm talking to women. It wasn't just like, just people, where it could be anyone. Then it's like, okay, if it applies, let it fly. But it's like you're generalizing and specifically saying women and ladies, this is our problem in communication. Not that this is the problem in communication, period. But, like I said earlier in my initial answer, I do see where there can be value in realizing that your emotions are too heightened at a point where you can even have a productive conversation. Because sometimes it can be like that. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to get the result I need. This is not going to be productive for either one of us. So I think I'm going to need to wait to maybe shelf this, like realizing and having that emotional intelligence to say, okay, I'm going to need to shelf this and maybe talk about this a little bit later. And then sometimes you just don't. And you're in that moment and you're really, really upset and you're emotional. And as my sis Tony said, like, if you're my partner or my friend or whatever, and you really know me, and this is something that I'm very upset about and I'm passionate about, then you need to welcome that at that moment. And we need to talk through it and work out. And you need to see how you hurt me, or how I feel invalidated, or how I feel disrespected. And if you're someone who cares about me, you should want to support me in that moment and clarify if that wasn't your intention. And then we can see how we can do things better. Because it's always like, okay, like if you don't know, that's one thing. But once I've told you that when you do this, this hurts me. When you do this, I feel disrespected. When you do this, I feel invalidated, and you continue to do it, then that's a different conversation. Or maybe we no longer need to have any conversations at all, because now I feel like you're doing it on purpose. So it's like yes, and like Tony said. So that's the part, that's kind of what bothered me, the generalization of it in general. But I can see value at times of realizing when you need to wait a minute to have a discussion.
I respect that. That just reminded me of like unrealistic expectations, right? If you don't lay out what those expectations are, as far as like what you expect how you expect me to respond to something when a situation comes up. Hey, I don't like the way you cook this, like cook it this way, or like, hey, can you clean up this way, or whatever the case, like identifying those expectations. Then now it's like we're not trying to read your mind type situation, but okay, now it's on me to take that into consideration and take responsibility in that.
Absolutely.
But if I don't have the expectation up front, I'm just kind of shooting in the dark, but that's the learning process and having the communication and all that other stuff. So I got you.
So I think this is a great conversation. And I think the one thing that I would push, I wouldn't even want to say push back. You guys have had a really interesting perspective. I will say that. What our podcast last week, for instance, was about ownership versus her owning her, right? Like that was the conversation that we were having. And so in having that conversation, what I'm hearing you say, or what I believe I hear you say is, this is not for me because it's broad. It's for all women, or she's saying it's for all women, and all women shouldn't own that or whatever. So my question, I guess, is, well, what do women own? Do women take ownership in these roles? Because we're saying these conversations, somebody said it would be okay if it was like for everybody. Somebody said that earlier in this conversation. And so my question kind of is, what would you own within this type of conversation though? Like, would you say, oh, I could be less emotional when I deliver a conversation to my significant other, or, whatever other point that she made? Is there any level of ownership that you believe you should take as a woman, or you feel like it's just too much of a big conversation to have in a micro kind of way?
It's interesting that you say that, because there's as Angie was saying earlier, there's a lot of things that she said that I could get behind, right? Like, as someone who, like, I've worked really, really hard on my communication skills over the years. Like, I've worked really, really hard, and I'm still not perfect at it. But my point is, like, when we think of like coming to a conversation being less emotional, like for me, I think that the issue is again, the onus is placed on women. And so instead, one thing that I've had to do, in working on my communication skills, is how can I show up and be more clear, right? Because as a human being, I am an emotional being. So my emotions aren't the issue. And the reason why I push back against that so much is because historically and even present day, as a woman, we're made to feel like our emotions are an issue. And so the issue is clarity. And so when I'm showing up, I should be able to, if for whatever reason that moment I'm like crying like a, just crying profusely, but that's how I'm showing up. As long as I can, through those tears and through the, the little ugly face cry, I can be clear, right? If that's, for me, yes, more than likely I'm going to wait to have that conversation. But what I'm saying is, suppose I wait and then I start talking and then I find my emotions, coming up again, right? So then what do? Like, I need to show up as a human being that I am and be like, all right, well, let me take some deep breaths and focus on being clear in my communication, right? And so, like, even in terms of, she says something about, women showing up, having assumptions. I see that someone in the chat also said, well, yeah, a lot of times we do. We show up with our own assumptions based on, the ways that we've interpreted things, and that's okay. But I think what's not okay about messages like these sometimes is it makes it a battle of the sexes, right? And I think that fuels a lot of tension between and among women and men. Whereas instead, we need to be having conversations about how do we, first of all, how do we do the self work, right? That's what I, started talking about, is that I had to do a lot of self work. How do we do the self work as individuals to show up to communicate effectively? Well, what is effective communication? That means that when I'm sending a message, right, to a receiver, that person is receiving the message in the way that I intended. So that's basic definition of effective communication. So how do I do the self work to do that? Number two, then how do I show up with my partner and we collectively do that work? How do we pause in a moment of contention when we notice that a conversation is going left and be like, look, we committed to being clear. We committed to being good listeners. We committed to protecting the integrity of this relationship at all costs, right? Even when things get tough. Right now, we're not doing that. So that's where my issue comes, is I think the conversation, it may seem broad, her message, but actually it's very narrow to me. Mm-hmm. It's actually too narrow, because we all need to work on those things. We're all human beings, so we all have assumptions. Our brains build schema, right? That's basic knowledge. So we all come to the table with these things. But when we don't frame the conversation correctly as a matter that, that needs to be brought up amongst other, people and not just men and women, I think it does more damage and it doesn't serve any of us.
Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking was, I think oftentimes, because you made a good point about clear communication. And I think what I hear her highlighting as a man is that sometimes when women talk from emotional space, we don't hear that. Like we stop listening, because it's like, okay, you're just being too emotional about this for me to hear it. So the question really is, because you're saying, and I hear you, and I'm glad you said the things you said, because you're speaking to, I'm a whole person, I'm an emotional being, let me be who I am. And I'm saying on the other side of that topic, though, is he's a whole different person. And when you are that emotional being, his ears shut down. So do you want to be communicating effectively so that he hears it? Or do you want to communicate to be all of who you are? I'm not saying it has to be either or, but that's kind of what presents itself in these kind of situations, right? Because we want to hear you, but we only sometimes can only really hear you when you're calmer and not as emotional.
And I'm gonna jump in, because as John gets like, because I want him to play the video with the guy talking, is because like I don't want to ruin how, because I want, actually, John plays it, I actually want to talk about what the guy said after that, because I agree with Tony that effective communication, yes, it is about packaging my communication so the person can hear it. But part of effective communication, I said it before, is knowing my target audience. And so the issue is when it would come, my standpoint with this is that this is why in broad strokes, I'm only speaking broad strokes, why men communicate effectively with men and while women tend to communicate effectively better with other women. And there's a disconnect when we communicate with each other, because on broad strokes, we communicate differently. I'm going to challenge one point that you all made. Yeah, I get there are some men, and actually I think I lean to be more emotional than most men. But on the broad strokes, most men are quick to be less emotional and tend to be more equation based. This happened and this happened, so therefore this happened. And so sometimes when it is, let me just chat. I think there's a problem when it's too much on any side. If I'm too equation based and I don't understand your emotions, then the communicate it's going to be a disconnect. If you're overly emotional and you can't look into the lens of me looking at the logic or the equation behind it, there's going to be a disconnect. And what I liked about her video is because her video, and I understand what you guys are saying, it's really about reaching the other side. Like if you're watching this episode, whatever it is, and my goal for this topic was, how do I, as a single woman, as a married woman, find a way to break the communication barrier with my partner of the opposite sex? And so, and understanding even in broad strokes, because there are some commonalities here, how does this person receive this message? Because I can only be the best at being me. I'm a man, which is why I actually tend to like lean more into hearing from women when to communicate with my partner, because I can only be me. And so listening to their other voice, it kind of changes it. Okay, cool. Oh, so when I said this, she heard this. So my communication is all off because that's not what I meant. And so even though I said it the right way, I packaged it, I thought it was not receptive to my target audience. And therefore, it may be effective communication, but it's miscommunication because it's being missed. And that's just where I'm kind of, my label of coming from is just, I always want women to see, and I'm not saying you all doing it because I think I love the responses and I'm loving this episode. But what I often see is a lot of, yeah, she's right. But you're trying to communicate with men, and at some point, if your goal is to communicate and to keep sustain communicate with your man, you gotta hear from him, and his point has value. And I often feel like when men complain, broad strokes, our point about this has no value, which is why I wanted to invite you all on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Terrence, I agree with what you're saying, but I also think that, like, okay, when my husband and I were doing premarital counseling, we had a session completely about communication, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the basic things that we learned that I still try to keep before me to this day, not just with him, but when I deal with anybody, is that we all filter how we respond to things through our experiences.
100%.
So that means that whether I'm a woman or a man talking to a woman or a man, if I can at least have shared experiences, then the communication barrier is only going to go but so far. So I don't think it necessarily becomes solely about like men understand men, and so they can typically communicate better, and women understand women, so they typically communicate better. But I think at a more basic level, like if we have shared experiences, like if we come from the same neighborhood, we have similar upbringings or backgrounds, like if we have all these things in common, I'm more likely to see your position and point before somebody that doesn't have those same experiences. I think that even if you're just thinking about it from that type of standpoint, I mean, I know that probably opens up a whole different, that's good. But I think that, like we mentioned before, the battle of the sexes stuff that kind of comes from these type of videos, but it's like, I think when you take that lens off of it, or don't look at it from just that perspective, you'll see that we're really not as we're often painted out to be. And I think when you can put that before yourself first, that takes the pressure off of communication, so that I can really see you for who you are and understand your experiences and where you're coming from. So then that even begins to soften my heart, prepare my mind, open my ears further to what it is that you may be trying to even get across to me in the first place.
I love that you said that, sis. I love that you said that, because I think that's kind of, where I was getting at in terms of like this conversation, even in listening to Terrence speak. I mean, obviously that's his perspective, so that's his truth. And for me, it also just solidified the fact that a lot of the ways that we show up into situations, especially as men and women, are based on like our socialization. So I think in many ways, it's not that, I mean, the research has shown it's not that men have vastly different brains than women. Like, that's not even true. But what it is that we socialize our boys it's not that, you know, men and boys don't have emotion. If that were true, Terrence wouldn't have been able to just admit that, yeah, I'm probably more emotional than most men. It's because of Terrence's experiences that he shows up that way. And that when those emotions arise for Terrence, he doesn't kind of try to tamp them down and like, oh no, that's not the man thing to do. So that's why I said when we're talking about these conversations about communication, as Angie just pointed out, it's about people coming together, right? And it's about connecting with other people, because you're right, Terrence, we have to make sure that we're aware of who our audience is as a person. If I looked at another man, if I walked into a conversation with a man and thought, oh, he's just a man, what was the point? Because if I'm going into it thinking, oh, he's not going to understand what I'm saying because I go into it like, here's a connection we have. Here's a way that I can communicate with him or her. And if that were the case, we got to think there are all types of relationships, right? So not every woman is with a man, right? So, you know, so how does that work? So that's why I think that's why for me, I'm always pushing to take this conversation out of the man versus woman thing, because all we do is continue to perpetuate ways of being for women and ways of being for men. I'm raising my son to tap into his emotion. I don't want him showing up to a relationship and being like, oh, I'm a man, so I'm emotional, or she's emotional, so, you know, I'm going to put this wall up. And maybe not on a conscious level, but even subconsciously. So this is bad. It goes against who I, no. If you're feeling some type of way, son, then you show up in that conversation and you express this is how you're feeling, because I refuse as a mother of a Black boy, you know, soon to be Black man, to have him showing up and perpetuating the same things that we've all been fed, you know, because it doesn't serve him and it won't serve the person that he's with. You know, he's dating now. So I'm constantly like, Caleb, with your girlfriend, you make sure you hear her. You know what I mean? I don't want him showing up thinking that, you know what I mean? That men are one way. No. You meet her in the middle. You connect.
All right, so I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit more. Terrence alluded to a video. I'm going to go ahead and show it right now. Okay, here we go.
Well, two things. One thing I feel the need to mention real quick.
Yeah.
This is especially for the men.
Okay.
So what I have realized in all my years of doing this is that men tend to forget that women typically are emotionally wired or more emotionally wired.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when she comes to you and expresses a concern, if that concern does not line up in your head logically, men tend to dismiss it. Okay. And they don't consider how she's feeling. And I want men to understand, you have to learn that we have to accept men and women are different. We are just built differently. And in understanding our differences, we can create more harmony with each other. When that woman says to you, this is how I feel, it's not about your logic at that point, bro. It's about how she feels. All right. And you got to tap into that in that moment. And if you say, well, how do I know she's not lying? Listen, if she's a good woman otherwise, then there's no reason to assume it's a lie right now. All right. If you know she has not been a problem for you, then don't project that negativity on her. Just take her as her expression at that moment and understand her emotion. So it's almost like if a woman says to you, I don't feel safe, but to you, I see no danger around. It's like, nah, you okay? Let's keep going. And it's like, no, but she's telling you she does not feel safe. As a man, you have to tap into that. Okay, baby, what can I do to help you feel safer? Or maybe, you know what? Since you don't feel safe, we're going to remove from this environment. And I think what happens is so many women feel dismissed and devalued because as men, again, we keep focusing on logic, but they're talking about their emotion, what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And that's real.
Right.
It may not be real to you in that moment, but that danger or her uncomfortableness in that moment is real to her. So you have to meet her there. All right. Now, two things. One thing.
All right. So that's the video on women's feeling safe and validating that feeling or validating that thought.
I just want to say, why? See, it's mighty funny how all these heads are shaking, these necks nodding, but ain't nobody gonna say, well, he's too broad because he used all men. Ain't nobody gonna, you know this.
This is applicable for all y'all men need to hear
all
this.
y'all men. Look, so quickly, because I'm gonna let you all talk. The reason why I found that video is because this video, it made me cancel out the girl's point number 2. Because I used to think, when the lady before made that point number 2, we're too emotional. I'm like, yeah, y'all too emotional, and we're so logical based. And he challenged me because he was just like, okay, so you need to lean into her emotion. And I was like, oh dang, you're right. Because I'm so equation based, I immediately dismiss what she feels in that moment, and that's not okay, because that's how she comes to the table in the conversation. And as a man, I can't dismiss that because I'm more logical and I'm more equation based. I'm like, how could you not know I cared about you? I did this, I've done this, I've done this. The equation means X, 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 X equals O. What you mean I don't care about you? But whatever it is, she feels at this moment you don't care about her. Let's unpack that. And so I dismissed her point number 2, was like, that might not be a bad thing as long as the person is willing to lean into the other side.
That's I have to disagree with you in the sense that I would still be like, he's overgeneralizing. And the only reason I'm gonna say that, and I realize that like I'm only one like specific viewpoint or narrative of a Black woman, but to be honest, most times there's some type of disconnect or disagreement. I'll use my own relationship. So I'm the type of person, I am situationally emotional. I have enough logic, and I am a thinker by nature. And because I'm also a talker by nature, I have had to work really hard with, first of all, not saying everything I think in my head out loud, like, because that could get me in trouble, for one. But also I'm the type of person on the emotional side of it, I can bottle up, and I'm not saying it's healthy. I know it's not healthy, and I'm unlearning it at this point in my life. But I will bottle emotions and try to keep them down until I have processed them in a way to communicate them logically. Because I know, well, for one, in my household, we can both be emotional, my husband and myself. We can both be very emotional, and he'll just speak from whatever he feels, just like I can just speak from whatever I feel. So if we're both in that space, somebody's got to be like, okay, hold on, wait a minute. You're at 10, bring it back down. So I have just kind of naturally become that person. So I will kind of suppress my emotions enough just to be like, and like we were talking about earlier, just if I'm on 10, you don't want me to talk on 10. Let me just get down to like a cool 6, a 5. We could come back to this conversation. So I think that in that sense, just speaking from that emotional piece, like your emotions can cloud your logic. And every guy, or that could be overgeneralizing, but I don't think it's fair to say that all guys have the ability to even do that. I think more guys than y'all may be given credit for will jump straight to their first reaction is raw emotion and less logic. Mm-hmm. I really think that. And at least in a lot of instances, even outside of like my husband, just in observing like male friends and people in my life, like I really think that in a general sense, men are a lot more emotional than they want to even give themselves credit for. Sometimes that raw reaction that they give, they don't realize if you go to 10 on something upsets you, how you rawly communicated, you raise your voice, whatever the case is, however you communicate that, I don't think that they naturally equate that with, that's me showing my emotions. But that's exactly what that is. And so I think that men are honestly just as emotional as women. Emotions don't always mean I'm crying, I'm having a meltdown, and I'm trying to talk this, and you. Yeah, so it's like, I think that because when I know that naturally when I hear people say, oh, she's emotional, even me, that's the first thing I think is like, oh, that's a sis trying to talk through tears. But it's like emotions is so much more than just your meltdowns and all of that. So, I mean, I feel like I'm talking too much. I'll let somebody else say something. But I think that that's like the start of it, is that I think that honestly, guys are a lot more emotional and expressive of those emotions than they even want to give themselves credit for. And so that's why his kind of like, it's still an overgeneralization. I appreciate bro for spit game, because what he's saying is true. You know what I'm saying? It is true what he's saying. You know what I'm saying? But it's still an overgeneralization, because he's still running under the assumption that every guy will have that moment where he's just like, bro, like, you're talking about this, like the safety thing, like it's nobody around you. There's no weapons around here. Nobody's running up on you. Like, I don't see how you don't feel safe. I get what he's saying, but it's also still an overgeneralization because I just think it's expressed differently and it comes across differently. But y'all just as emotional.
You're right. You're right. I like that you said that. Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. It looks different. And, even Jeremiah, thank you for putting that in the comments. Men's emotions have been seen in society as acceptable.
100%.
You're right. And because, like you said, maybe sometimes our expression of those emotions looks differently, they're categorized differently. So if a man raises his voice, he's not emotional. He's just being a man, right? He's just getting loud. He's just getting stern. And so I think, for me, it just continues to go back down to like, when do we break down those stereotypes and break down those barriers that we continue to place on ourselves? Because that's all it does. When we have conversations that, again, I keep going back to the fact that it seems like it's a broad stroke, but for me, it isn't. It's very limiting to me. And I think that's the thing that's got me wanting to like break out the box. It's like, well, because I've been told that I'm actually not emotional. I was told, by in a previous relationship that, be a woman. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Because you don't see me always breaking down crying. Like I'm again, so let's have a real conversation. Are we talking about having emotions, or are we talking about emotional regulation? You know what I mean? I'm sorry, that's an educated coming out, but I'm just saying, like, let's be specific. Let's be clear about what we're really talking about. Like, let's not have a conversation about women being emotional beings. Again, as we are human, unless and yes, I know there are people with different learning differences and things like that who might not experience them in the same way. But part of being human actually is the fact that we all are emotional beings. So what we're really talking about is emotional regulation. And what we've been told and what we've taken on is the fact that women, we don't regulate our emotions in a positive way. But I don't even think that that's true.
Especially women of color. Especially
women of color, especially Black women. Like, let's be real clear here.
Absolutely.
Especially Black women.
Okay. I have, so y'all said a lot. I'm listening to y'all. I'm not really, I'm taking that backseat role right now. And I think it's interesting, to what Terrence's point was with having that second video. I actually really thought that y'all would all be like, yeah, that's right. Y'all need to listen to us. Like, or, I feel seen. I saw somebody say, I feel seen today, seen Saturdays or whatever. And
Khalida was siding with the girl. See, he sees me.
Well, what's interesting about that is that I actually thought that would have been more of a agreed upon thought, because I think a lot of times men don't see women in that way. I think like he was saying, I actually kind of more so agree with him, is that we're like, well, if you have this, you have this, you have that. As far as what I can see, you should be fine. But like that thought process of, well, if you have a thought, if you have a feeling, or whatever the feeling might be, validating that feeling first, or at least hearing that feeling first and unraveling or unpacking that feeling first, I do think there's some validity to that. I think that there's a lot of things that I can own in that. And so, which brings me to my next thought, I guess. What, as far as ownership, when is the last time you took ownership in your prospective relationships? Can you give a scenario of when you've taken ownership in your previous relationship or your current relationship? Taking ownership. Go ahead.
Ownership, like
in any way, like your husband says, "Hey, man, I don't know, whatever the situation is," or your previous spouse says, "Oh, you do this a lot, right?" Like for instance, like you take the commanding role a lot, and I want to take that role. And let's say, for instance, he says that to you. Do you be like, if it's true, are you more likely to be like, you know what, I own that, I do that sometimes, or are you more pushback on, I don't do that, and maybe have a little less self-awareness about those type of things? Like, where are you on the spectrum of taking ownership in your relationships?
Well, I'll say, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. That's all about it.
I was just going to say, I know for me that, my husband has said before in times that he will feel like I'm listening to him to like respond, and then like I'll like cut him off, as opposed to like really like truly like listening. So I know that's something that I will take ownership in, that I'm just trying to work on in general. Like it'll be like interject to like say my point. And it's like, that's not my intention to do it. Like, I'm usually doing it because I don't want to forget like what I have to say. but I'm learning and I'm like being more aware of it, where I'm like, I'll stop myself in it. I do it in all my relationships. Even my sisters were telling me, you know, right, Tony could tell you, my sis, that I do it. And it's not like intentional, but I have to still own and understand the impact that it can have on someone else, you know, when they're trying to tell me something so that, and they want me to listen and hear them, then I'm chiming in, saying like, you know, almost like I'm trying to make a connection or say my point with it. But for some people and for my husband, for him, it feels like, you know, I'm not really truly hearing him. Like I'm listening just to respond and, you know, give my point. So that's something that I will say I've taken ownership in and tried to actively work on.
Okay.
That's
Jeremiah tried to
that's
help me
really
out
cool
and
because
say it a better way. He
yeah.
said, "Are you able to have proper self-awareness?" But either way, yeah, self-awareness or ownership. Somebody else had something. I don't. Mike, what do you?
No, I was about to comment off of that. So I appreciate you saying that because it made me think back to the lady from the video, and she had mentioned something about like making assumptions, and even somebody in the comments had mentioned like, hey, I have an assumption that initially starts the conversation to like break down like communication and get to a level of like understanding of what this assumption is. The problem is what happens, well, broad strokes, like with women sometimes, or even with men. We get into a conversation where we come into it with assumptions, and then once those assumptions are cleared up, it's already like stamped in your head that you're like you still have this narrative that's being built out, and you're not even hearing the other person's side of it. You're not even hearing, hey, I literally just cleared that up in this conversation. Did you not just hear it? It's like, no, but you did this, that, and the third, and blah blah blah. And I think it's a matter of like being able to orient the conversation at that point, or orient the information that you're receiving after you've like cleared up that level of communication. Say for instance, you know, hey, I heard you was hanging out. I know you were hanging out with your boys last night, but I heard it was some women there or whatever like that, and you were talking to somebody. It's like, no, this is what happened. This is where I was. This, that, and the third. Blah blah blah. It's like, nah, but I think what ended up happening was blah 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 X Y Z. It was like, yo, like I literally just cleared that up. Like, so being able to orient and say, oh, okay, he just cleared that up. Cool. Take it left, and we can go from there and clear this up. So I think my point that I was trying to make was like, cool. Nafisa, I appreciate you saying that because like sometimes people take those assumptions and just continue to egg it, just continue to go on with it without like taking into consideration like, hey, logically, okay, we cleared that up. Cool, let's move on.
Before we move on to everybody else answering, I want to ask another kind of parenthetical question. Do you think most women, or at least the women here on this panel, do you have a problem hearing your husband when he brings situations to you, or previously hearing your husband when he brings situations like Nafisa was saying? Do you interject too quickly sometimes, or do you sometimes feel like, oh, I actually listen to him every time, and I'm actually very quiet, and I wait for him to finish his thoughts, and I'm ready to receive all that he has, and then once he's done talking, I'm ready to give my full view to my husband. Like, you know, which way are you guys here on this panel?
Now, John, I'll be honest with you. It's not sunshine and rainbows like that.
Oh, okay.
Definitely, I wouldn't even sit here and lie and say that I'm always just sitting quiet and I let him, you know, speak his piece without saying anything. And I just be like, okay, darling, yeah, sure, I'll work on that. It absolutely doesn't go like that.
Right.
To be honest, now I will hear him out. Now I am not quick to own things, just from the sense of I want to know that it's not just being said to say. Like, are you saying this because it's rooted in something? So I prefer to like hear everything you want to dialogue to me about it before I know that that's something I need to internalize and work on. Because sometimes, and the reason I'm saying that is because like, so let's just say even like if you're in an argument, right? Sometimes, whether it's petty or not, sometimes you just may say something to get under the other person's skin. So it doesn't necessarily have validity. You're just saying what you're saying because you want to, I might have jabbed you, so you're trying to jab me back. So like when something is being said about something, I may need to, you know, that self-check moment. Like, is this something I need to own? Is this something I need to work on? I'll be like, really? I did that? Okay, when? And not in a combative way per se, but like, you know, when? Like, so what happened? for one, because I want to hear your full perspective, and I want to hear what is rooted in, because I want to make sure that what's actually being said is how you meant to communicate it. Like that I'm not just assuming that I understand what it is that you're saying, that I'm need to work on. I could take a tagline and run with it, but I have a completely different meaning in my head than the way that it's trying to be presented or come across, if that makes sense. So I want to, I'll ask questions, clarifying questions, because now I need to know, okay, so if this really is a thing, I need to hear everything that you may have to say about it before I'm like, you know what, actually you're right, I'll own that. So it's a journey for me. Like, you can't just say something to me, and that's really anybody. It's not just Devin, my husband. It's not just him. Like, that's anybody, friends, co-workers, anybody. Like, you can't just say anything to me and I'll just own that. Because if so, then you really could find yourself owning other people's insecurities, owning other people's all the stuff that they're trying to project onto you, and that could be a whole nother.
Oh, yeah, I agree there.
So
you know what I'm saying?
So Angie needs receipts. That's the bottom line. Okay. You need receipts.
Before I'll be like, actually, I can work on that.
And before it goes I know it's about to go another direction, but before it does, I want Edwina and Dr. Tony to also answer that same question.
That's what I was about to say.
Before we go
Thank
somewhere.
you.
Go ahead.
So I'm very reflective, and I don't mind taking ownership if I, was wrong and whatever. I think one, it depends on how I'm approached. Like Angie was saying, how you're coming to me with that conversation, with the assumption, if you're real loud about it, you almost on a defensive mode will kind of take place. But I know for me, I kind of do the same thing. I ask questions. I need to know the full picture of what exactly is it that I'm being, accused of or whatsoever. And, if it's something where, I'll take my time, I will reflect on it. If you're able to give me those specific, dates and times in which I did something that you continue to say is something that I did.
Another receipt.
I reflect on it. I was like, you know what? You are absolutely correct. And I will, I will confirm it or whatsoever. I will take ownership of it. And then I might ask a question of well, how can we go from here? What's the solution? So that's, for me, I see conversation as, especially if it's a concern, if it's something that has to do with me, I ask the question, what is it that you want to see differently? What's the outcome that you're looking for? And I feel like if it's effective communication, and that's why we're taking this journey, if we're looking for some sort of an outcome, that's something that we can do together, ask those questions and go forward.
But when he brings it, just want to add a last question. When he brings it to you, you listen to him. You don't interject or you don't interrupt. You just listen. That's what
I'm saying. It's the way in which he approaches it.
So your situation.
If he's coming at me well, I heard that da 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 da, or you always, and it's the way in which you approach me. Don't come at me in a way you're trying to fight.
Because you about to swing.
Defensive way. Yeah, wait a minute now, hold on. So, but if it's something hey, babe, I realized that it's something that's really bothering me and da da da. And I'm like, oh, then I will open up and hear you out. The full concern or whatsoever. I don't have a problem with that.
All right, so I'm gonna let Dr. Tony answer that. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I'll hear you out if the receipts add up. I'm be honest, if the receipts don't add up, I'm interjecting.
So he got to write. He got to write. He got to take notes. He got to take notes.
You got to add.
I was.
Hold on.
I was like that.
I want Dr. Tony to answer before, and then what I want to do is that Dr. Tony. Dr. Tony
had that logic. That logic is important at that point.
Dr. Tony answer, and then I do want to pivot after Mike speaks. I do want to pivot to if the person doesn't come correct, even though they are right with that negate ownership. Go ahead, Dr. Tony.
Yeah. So, a couple of things I've been thinking about. One thing I've been thinking about to your question you just asked around not interrupting. And again, I have to sometimes remember that with the work that I do, I work so hard on communicating. And so sometimes other people might not be there. So I say that to say, when I'm thinking about cutting people off and interjecting, for me as someone who studied communication, you also have to think about past experiences. When I grew up culturally, we engaged in crosstalk. And that was not seen as, being disrespectful. So when I saw adults talking, it was I went to the mall. Really? There was so much back and forth. There was so many clarifying questions that were being asked. That's the way that I grew up seeing adults communicate with one another. So I've had to work at actually, engaging in serial testimony where one person speaks and then the next person speaks. So I just point that out because I think a lot of times, again, to elevate this conversation a bit, when we're talking about communication and what's seen as disrespectful or negative, we really have to go back to, well, what are folks, prior experiences? We know that they're bringing those experiences with them to relationships. So like in terms of, also answering your question around ownership, my sisters on here, Weena and Nafisa, know I'm like ownership queen. Like they will, I'll be quick to be like, yeah, I own that. But to Angie's point, honestly, I think it's a slippery slope when we do get into just owning each and everything, right? Because that will have you thinking that as a Black woman that I'm aggressive when I'm passionate or when I'm assertive or when I'm direct, right? So people, you're right. People can't just place any label on me, but I will own my actions. So if you said, Tony, you raised your voice, yes, I did. You're right, I did. I could have probably, been a little lower with my voice, a little softer with my tone. But what we're not going to do is label me any old kind of way, and I'm going to take that on because then that impacts my self identity, and I'm not having that. So that's enough.
Yeah, because I hate the labeling thing for both men and women, and I think also the labeling thing also that's where I think you lead into a conversation with an assumption. So like in an argument with a partner, you lead in with this, you don't care about me, and so what that comes in is as an assumption instead of sticking it or tabling it to the action. When you did this, I did not feel cared for. And so that was one point I wanted to make earlier. And I remember Angie was talking about she made a point, and I wanted to interject and say, well, why don't you do it that way? Because what I'm learning in therapy is we're actually in my therapy, it's unpacking bad communication habits across the board that could be applicable to multiple points and multiple things in my life. Why do I just stop you from talking instead of pause, give you 2 minutes, put it on the clock, you get it out, and then I take over? And then we have a conversation. Or say, you know what, we need to stop right here because we're both too emotional. We need to walk away, spend 30 minutes, and come back. And these are like tools. And so my thing is, we learn these tools in hopefully in premarital counseling or whatever it is, and then we throw them out the window and we undergo our relationships instead of utilizing healthy communication tools that will make us better. And my second point with that is, and I wanted to ask, I'm wondering because I feel like maybe you 4 women are unicorns, and that's great if you all are, but I'm wondering, like in all seriousness, how does our level of academia play in this? How does me being an educator and play in my level of emotional maturity? Because have I not have to work on this as a career path and as a career, like, makes sense? I would not be able to take some of these, not perfect, but apply some of these in my relationships because I'm just more educated. And so I'm wondering if does that play away, like if we are some of our past experiences, even with people, we also are some of past experiences we're being taught to communicate, even like as Dr. Tony said, in our career path. Well, this joint works at home, right? Like how I legit. I have to watch my communication with my female colleagues versus my male colleagues. I'm not saying if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm wondering if I say this in this kind of way to this Black female teacher, because when she walks in this room, she does not leave that she's a Black female when she walks into that building. And if I package it this statement this way, how is it going to be received by her? Or at least I'm cognizant of that. So I gotta say, I might say, hey, meet me in my office. Hey, come talk to me in my office real quick. I don't want to voice this via email because it's going to be received a totally different kind of way. And so I'm just wondering that kind of question.
So I would answer that to say yes. Like, educational background does matter. Prime example, like I work in IT, and there's this stigma where a lot of guys, whether they're administrators, whether they're engineers, they don't know how to properly communicate. Like, people are so focused on the computers and being able to, fix a computer, being able to fix a server, whatever the case, but being able to tell somebody what you did in an instructional manner, or like, just being able to write up simple emails, stuff like that. there's a stigma where folks don't know how to do that. And even in like like in-person conversations, I noticed like conversations happen like what Dr. Tony was saying about the what you call it, cross communication or something like
Yeah,
that, where like
crosstalk.
you're crosstalk, right? So I grew up where like I have to like listen to what somebody's saying before I can interject and have that conversation so we can effectively communicate together. But to experience that in the workplace, I initially took that as disrespect. I'm like, yo, like you keep cutting me off. Chill. Like, let me get my thought out first before you decide to respond to me. Cause now you're just talking to me like you talking to respond rather than like talking to like actually respond to what I'm saying. You're talking just to get out your thought or whatever. And what I've also noticed is like I had to catch myself in a way of like bringing that type of communication home, because if I'm at work more than I am at home, then I can tend to mold my sense of communication around what I experience from day to day at work, bring that home, and now I'm cutting my wife off. You know what I'm saying? Like in conversation, I constantly have to make sure I'm balancing that and doing like self-assessment to say or have self-awareness to say, okay, compartmentalize this at work, this is how we talk at work. Compartmentalize this is how we talk at home. So to answer your question, Terrence, yes, like I think educational background matters. As far as like what you do for career matters, because like people communicate differently in those different arenas.
I would say before I let the other lady speak. Before that, I would even say how you were brought up matters even more than how you interact as an adult. A lot of the value systems that we've kind of created were cemented in how we were raised, and a lot of why we think we're right was how we were raised. And so I think when we talk about conversations of how people fight properly or fairly, my kids right now are learning how to communicate from how my wife and I interact or communicate. Literally right now, they're 4 and 1. But as we're getting older, and maybe we do it incorrectly or correctly, they're forming their world around communication based off of what we do, how we live, how we interact with each other. So I grew up, I don't know how you guys grew up. My parents didn't fight a lot in front of me. So I think I was at a disadvantage by that because I didn't learn how to fight properly. I think my parents tried to shield me from that. Therefore, when I got married and started fighting, I was like, oh, when you're married, you don't fight. So we need to get a divorce. So like that's literally how my brain worked, because it's like no fight should happen because my parents never fought and they had a great marriage. So therefore we fight and we have a bad marriage. Wow. So it's a very obviously like reduced way of saying the same thing. But I think as a bottom line, when you're talking about interactions between spouses, I think it's important about how you're raised. And I think it sounds great, of course, to be like emotional and calculated or measured, but obviously that's impossible, right? Like when you're emotional, you're emotional. Mm-hmm. So you may fight in front of your kids and all that stuff. What I'm trying to learn how to do is, if I am to have an argument in front of my kids, how do I not do that in a way that is aggressive and mean, right? And get loud and all that other stuff. Like, because I don't want my daughters now to go find a husband that they identify that quality as, oh, that's what my dad was. Therefore, that's what I need to have. So I'm trying to unlearn that within my own household.
Wow, that's good. That's real good.
Mm-hmm. I think people.
Sorry, go ahead, Nafisa. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to kind of piggyback on that. Like people are just, everyone are products of their environment, innately, and then also just unconsciously, often. And I think everybody, for the most part, usually is trying their very best to show up as their best self. But it's like you go off what you've seen, how you grew up, and you have to unlearn those behaviors that may have had a negative impact. Just as Tony talked about, she's done a lot of self-work, and it starts with that self-work and being able to like recognize and being able to self-reflect and know when you're in that moment to kind of like stop yourself when you're going right into that habit of what you've already known, what you just have known and seen to do out of habit, but realizing that, okay, it's not serving me. It's not serving my this relationship. What work do I need to do to unlearn this, to try to be more aware and, to work on it? Because we're all a work in progress. No one is perfect. But I think like when you're showing up in these conversations and kind of just like Tony kept saying, just being human and kind of understanding where the other person is coming from. Because a lot of times we're all just doing our best or trying our best. And maybe you're not a good listener because you didn't learn how to be a good listener. Maybe you're not an effective communicator because you didn't see effective communication growing up. But it's like, okay, but then it also comes to a point where you do have to have that ownership and say, okay, yeah, I can only use that for so long. And it's like, yeah, we understand that that's not what you've seen and you didn't learn that behavior, but it's like, okay, now we need to fix it because it's become, it's become toxic, or it's become where it's not helping or bringing positive light or growth into your relationship or marriage, whatever type of relationship that it may be. So it really just starts with self, and that self work and self realization. And I think when you do that self work, you're able to take on that ownership more and maybe stop in the moment to see, like, okay, not that you're going to take on and have somebody label you, but you also have to be able to realize, like, okay, like this is something that I've continuously done. And maybe it's not intentional, this is not my intent, but I see that this is not having a positive impact on this relationship. What can I do to kind of fix this and try to be more aware of it?
More things are caught than taught.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
more things are caught than taught. And we do this thing in school where it's the intended curriculum versus the unintended curriculum. And so while you're teaching this lesson, but what else are you giving off? And so a lot of times with our parents, they're teaching you things. Hey, don't do this. Hey, don't do this. Don't do this. But in the background, what they're not saying, you're still catching too. And sometimes the unintended curriculum can last a little bit harder and last a little bit longer
And
than what you
supersede.
intended to
Yeah.
give off.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important. One thing that I try to do in my relationship, and I definitely try to do in the work that I do around having difficult conversations, is to stay in conversation. I think that is, for me, one of the most important things, because as Nafisa already pointed out, we're all doing the best with the tools we've been given, right? And so at the end of the day, for me, what's most important is not that if you show up to, a conversation with me yelling, and I know that this is me now, because before I would pop off back at you, but I've done enough work to where I'm like, let me look beyond his behavior and see what's actually going on here, right? So I can sit and listen through some of that sometimes, right? It depends on, what's going on. But my point is, even if I can't, I might say, let's come back to it. I think the most important thing is that no matter what type of relationship we're talking about, whether it's a romantic one, a work relationship, or friendship, that we keep returning to the conversation, we keep returning to the drawing board, because too often what I've seen and what I've experienced is there being, let's say, a mismatch in communication styles, and then folks shutting down the conversation because they labeled it as, disrespect. Like I said, if I'm coming to a conversation and what I've seen is crosstalk, and when Dr. Mike was talking earlier, you were talking about at work, you seeing it as, disrespectful. Maybe someone, is listening to respond, but the way I grew up is, well, all communication is listening to, like, respond, right? But it's not in a way that I think sometimes is negatively painted, because I am hearing you. That's how I'm able to respond to what you're saying. We're engaging. Like, that's the way that I grew up seeing communication. And in different relationships, and recognizing that not everyone grew up seeing people communicate that way. I've had to do the self work to say, you know what, when I'm communicating with this person, I have to show up in this way. Yes, it's authentically me, but also in order for it to be effective, I've got to make sure that I'm giving that person, what it is that they need to hear me as well in that moment. And I think that, for me, is paramount. Again, just stay in communication with each other and not shut it down, because we're so quick to write people off. It happens all the time, not just with men and women, but I see it in my work when dealing with difficult conversations around race, right? When we see folks saying things, think about it. That's how a lot of times Black and brown folks are labeled in certain ways, because of the way we communicate collectively when we put men and women together. So that goes back just to my point about elevating and broadening this, like truly making this conversation broad, because at the end of the day, we're choosing to talk about men and women. I think that is a really, helpful conversation to have. And when we think about it, we're really just talking about people communicating with each other, and how can we all show up better, for one another.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
quality
What?
relationship.
Mike. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was saying quality relationships aren't built overnight. And they aren't just ready-made. And because we live in a ready-made society, a microwave society where everything is like constantly given to us, like right now, people tend to not want to put in the work. But understanding like building quality relationships takes building, and it takes time, it takes effort. And it's our responsibility as individuals to be able to to put in the work, like to put in the work to build those quality relationships, to effectively, like, not just like regardless of whatever relationship you're in, whether it's, a work relationship, whether it's like a relationship with a spouse, or like just with a friendship. It doesn't matter. Like, if you want something quality out of it, you got to put in the work to be able to do that.
100%. And even going into this idea, like, you guys have actually named a lot of good things, even related to this podcast, because of course the things that have been more viral have been the things that are more like, oh, he said this or she said that, and it was already viral last week, and we talk about it here on the podcast. This is not a viral conversation because this is the work, right? Like, having those actual conversations about, well, why do you think that way and why do you think that way? A lot of times Terrence will send us, or we'll send each other, these TikToks, because in some ways for us, these things that they're saying, they either illuminate to us, or we believe that they're shedding light on something that we don't understand. So like when a woman, like what we showed earlier, says whatever point she says, we're like, oh, that's why they think that way. Or maybe there is more learning they have to do, or more ownership they have to take, or whatever the case may be as women. So we're saying that it's validating this conversation for us, and you guys are saying, well, it's not that simple as that, right? Like, it's not as simple or not as easy to just say, just own everything. Like, maybe there is a certain level of ownership, but there's also a certain level of, you got to understand as a husband or as a boyfriend or whatever the case may be, what it takes to actually make this thing work. So I think before we had this conversation, it was like, yeah, they do need to do better. What's wrong with them? Like, we were over here like kind of having that rah-rah moment. But I think as we're having more intellectual conversations about it, we're like, you know what? I can see how I can work in this area, but also she can also own this area, and we could both be doing this, and it would be fruitful for both of us, right? So one last thing I want to ask before we hop off of the podcast today. What do you think about women saying or believing I am the table? You know how people say, what do you bring to the table? What do you have? What do you offer to the table? This kind of thing, right? What do you believe or feel about being the table? I am the table. I don't gotta bring nothing but myself, because I'm all this in the back. Look, yeah, exactly. Edwina is, I'm all of this, and you need to bring yourself, because where do y'all fall in line in that conversation?
Hair flips and everything.
Do you feel that that's a valid statement for women? Do you feel that's a valid statement for women, or do you feel like it's like, oh, that's just a popular culture saying that's not really true for women?
Can I give my contrary opinion first, and then I'll let the lovely ladies clean it up, because I'm probably a different viewpoint than they do. John, I'll be honest with you, I hate that saying so much. Like, with a passion.
Me too, but go ahead.
The reason I hate it so much is because who can support that? Because you're projecting to the world that you need nothing. You need no one, right? And I feel like that does more damage to any type of relationship than even poor communication. You need to feel needed. Your partner, whoever you're in a relationship with, needs to feel needed. Like, that's kind of like the base level of part of what brings you together is, like, you love that person. You need to be, you desire to be around them. You need to. I feel like constantly projecting, like, I am the table, I am this, I am that, you gotta be this, that, or it's like, who could, like, from a beginner, like take the fact that I'm a married woman out of the equation, all of that. Like, I just feel like if I was a single woman and that's how I walked around, what guy would want to approach me? If he doesn't feel like, because I mean, guys, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, y'all are like hardwired to be protectors, hardwired to be providers, hardwired, like, just in a general sense, right? So it's like, if I'm saying I am the table, I am this, I am that, and you got to be this, that, or the third before you can step to me, who's stepping to me? I'm going to be single for a long time. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's just how I feel about it. Like, I just feel like at the base level, before you even talk about being, like, getting into that relationship, just like, that doesn't even make you approachable, I think. And I think that it also kind of projects that you're not really even open to any of the other stuff we just spent the last hour and a half talking about. Like you don't seem to be open to any level of self-work, being told that you're wrong, being told that there's also more to life than being this table. Like I just feel like that you just project all the things that are so opposite of why people desire to be in relationships. Like at the base level, I feel like we desire to be in relationships, not just for, coloring or coloring things.
Coloring means SEX.
Yes.
That's code words. Code words.
Which also desire, long time listener, first time caller.
That's what I'm talking about. She knows what coloring means.
Real fan.
You also desire to be in a relationship because, like, you learn from your partner. You know what I'm saying? You learn different things. They expose you to different things. They open your mind to, whether it's culturally, whether it's food, whether it's, movies, whatever it is. So it's like, if you're projecting that, like, I'm this perfect human being that is everything, all that bag of chips, I just feel like you're not even approachable or open to the things that make a relationship a relationship. So every time, like, scrolling Instagram, scrolling Reels, whatever, when I hear that soundbite, y'all, I cringe. Like, it rubs me the wrong way because I'm just like, since I get what you're saying, and more power to you, on the self-confidence and all that, but I just feel like you're not even realizing the message you're projecting. All right, I'm off.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely I feel the same way. I can see the value and definitely knowing your worth. That's one thing, but I think just that whole statement, like I am the table, just the whole thing, it just has such a negative connotation that you don't need anything or anybody else. And I want to say, like, I'm, heterosexual. Like I will say in a minute, I don't need a man. I'm not trying to lift nothing heavy. Help me out. Put this together. There's different stuff. I will say a minute. I will be a damsel in distress in a minute. I do it at work too. Help, put this together. I'm asking my male teachers in my department. Can you help me? Can you lift this? Can you kill this bug? Whatever, that I may need or want. Can you take the snow off my car? Can you put this light bulb up? Maybe I could do it, but I don't want to.
No, that's
so
I just love the blatant honesty.
I have problems.
Zero interest in perpetuating the stereotype of a strong Black woman. Zero interest.
Oh yeah,
Zero interest.
We had a whole podcast on that.
I mean, the thing is, I am a strong person, and I happen to be a Black woman. But right. the narrative that strong Black woman projects is like, I can never be vulnerable. I can never be emotional. I can never it's either I express myself too much or I don't talk enough, or I have zero interest in keeping up with everything that stereotype strong Black woman. I can take all these things. I can be, take this to the chin, turn the other cheek. Zero interest. If I'm in a relationship, I want to cry. I want to be soft. I want to be overly feminine. I want my man to feel like he can be a man. You can do whatever you want for me, and guess what? I'm gonna let it happen. But I'm gonna also do for you. I can cater for you. I can cater to you. I have zero interest in being the whole table. Zero interest. I will pull up a chair to your table happily. I will push the vision of your table. I will turn on the projector.
John, like, this is the commercial. This is how you make the commercial for this episode.
Zero stars.
I love it.
You know what? It's funny. Like I'm really listening because I don't feel as strongly as you two feel about it, and I also very much heavily push back against the strong Black woman stereotype, right? And so, like, while I guess I don't look at when people say I'm the table, I don't look at it as extreme as you all are projecting it. Like for me, I think it's more of a movement, and I understand it. I mean, it's just like for me, I equate it to Black girl magic, right? Or Black power. I think that the idea behind it is to shed a light on the fact that for so long we've been taught that we have to pull up a seat, as Angie said, to someone else's table. So then what happens when someone takes their chair away or kicks it from underneath your feet? So that's kind of like the way that I look at this movement around. Do I walk around saying I'm the table? No, I don't think I ever have. And I do project that I'm a whole person. So I don't need, like when Angie was talking, I heard you talk about needing, but I also heard you say the word desire. I actually want to desire my mate, because I have been in a situation where I didn't need them. And what happens when they take away those resources that you need? What are you left with if you're not a whole person when you show up? And I think sometimes it's a huge burden to place on people to, for them to complete you and to complete your life. So I think that, and again, and I, even me saying that, I don't mean it in a very extreme way. Like, of course, I'm like, oh, you complete me, honey, in a romantic sense. But at the end of the day, I have to do my self-work to be my whole person when I show up to any type of relationship. Otherwise, from me and from my experience, it sets me up to, be at the whim and wishes of other people. And, me leading in that way with the fact that, yes, I'm a whole person. So I desire you and I want you to complement my life in that way. I don't have, like, I'm single right now by choice. Like, I don't have to be single forever. I do not have a shortage of suitors and very high value men at that. Look, my sister's laughing because you already know, and I'm talking high value. Right? I'm just saying. So I don't have to show up like, oh, I need you, for a man to desire me. No, I show up like, listen, yes, I absolutely want to partner with you, right? I absolutely want to contribute to your life in this way. I absolutely want you to contribute to my life in this way. And guess what? I attract those types of men that actually want a high value woman and see a high value woman in me. And not that I'm the only type of high value woman, but I'm just saying that it doesn't discount or exclude women, like me, or even like women who, proclaim to be the whole table. I don't, but I'm just saying it doesn't exclude them from actually finding suitable mates and being in healthy relationships when they show up as whole people.
And you know what, Dr. Tony, I love that. But just to clarify a little further by saying, like, I don't mind pulling my seat up to another person's table. If you think about like a CEO roundtable, the CEO and all the big wigs sit at the same table. I can pull up to the CEO's table and still bring value to that table, still be, I can still be he might be CEO, I can still be CFO at that same table. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that because I want to pull my seat up to someone else's table that I'm saying that that's like undervalued or devalued. And I appreciate you making that point. So because I don't want anybody to hear what I'm saying and I'm equating, not wanting to be at the table with like, I'm okay with being undervalued, because that's not the case. Like, if you CEO, I'm still on that leadership squad. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm still, when I pull that seat up to the table, I'm still bringing value to that table. I'm not saying that what I bring to the situation is not worthy of being. I'm just saying that I'm good with like not walking around feeling like it's CEO or nothing, and I don't need a co-CEO, because I need a co-CEO.
And think about, sis, and you know what, thank you for clarifying that. I didn't take it that way, but I know that a lot of folks will. And that's why I started, my point about the fact that for me, even though I don't walk around saying that, I understand that it's a movement. I understand why that movement exists. It exists because for too long, as women, we've been told that that's all we can do. I pull up my seat to many tables, and I still got my own table over here. I'm pulling up my seat to this podcast. I got my own podcast over there. You get what I'm saying? So that's what I mean. I work in other people's schools. I got my own business over here. And so, but for too long, as women, we've been told that the only thing we can do is pull up to other people's table. And I don't think that there should be, they should be mutually exclusive, as I just shared. I think that both realities can and should exist. And that's where I talked about like being whole. I can be whole and still pull your puzzle piece up to the side of my puzzle. We make an even bigger puzzle, an even more beautiful picture, right? So it's not, but I think that sometimes for me, things that I've seen in social media around pushback around women, especially Black women, because we get it extra hard, when we start to move in that manner, people got something to say about Black girl magic. What does that mean? It's like we have to understand why some of these movements even exist and realize that they are anti-oppressive movements. And so instead of, maybe classifying them on one end of a spectrum or one, opposite end of a spectrum from another, just recognizing and appreciating, oh, this is a platform so that other women can feel like, yes, I can be the whole table. It does not mean that I can't sit at somebody else's as well.
All right. So last thought with Edwina.
Thank you. So yes, I hear everybody. And my first thing was with the whole, like, what does this even mean? What somebody say, like, come to the table? Like, what does the table represent? And so I'm always coming with like questions like that. Like, that's always, because I need to know, like, clarify for me in your mind, like, what does this mean when you ask, like, what do you bring to the table? What is the table? So in hearing that, for me, I saw a table in the metaphor of wholeness, and like what Tony was saying, like, I am like my own table, as in I'm coming as a whole person. And I also see it as, and it's not that I'm saying like I don't need anybody else, but technically I really don't need, it's not a need. I think I'm doing pretty well by myself. And so it is. I feel like when we're coming together, what relationship whatsoever, this whole representation of table I see as to like wholeness coming together. And we're not coming to complete each other, but it's like I'm coming as my whole self, you're coming as your whole self. And yes, that desire or that need is something where I don't want to be like, I don't want to be by myself, or I don't want to do these things or whatsoever. And yes, you can offer these things to me, but it's not per se that I technically need anything from someone else. Providing for myself. So that's how I see it. Like, for me, it was just like a wholeness thing. It wasn't whatever that people were seeing, like little pieces or puzzles or whatsoever. That's just my 2 cents on the matter.
I'm gonna challenge a little bit because I'm with Jeremiah. Normally, and I'm broad strokes. I'm speaking broad strokes.
Just talk, Terrence.
Broad strokes. I gotta say, because I don't want Angie punching me in my face.
Let her punch you. Go ahead and say it.
So broad strokes. No, the reason why I hate the pushback from the question is usually the responses that are met with it. Like when a woman says broad strokes, when I'm the table, I got my own job, I got my own car, I can buy my own things. I'm a CEO. I got this, I got all of that, etc. Which is why and men are like, that's cute, that's props to you. I don't care about none of that. And most real men could care less about that. What it becomes for me is, yo, hats off, because like legit, you worked your grass off, you deserve it, you've earned it, all etc. But when I as a man ask, what do you bring for me? It's not going to be any of your tangible accolades, because that's what you do for you, and that's what you work for you. Your accolades have no place here. Now, I'm gonna flip that a little bit. Don't get me wrong. I'm only speaking for me. Like I said again, my wife makes more than me. Makes sense? And so it would be very difficult for me as a man. I can't have no stay-at-home woman. It just ain't gonna happen. It's just like I'm doing on this rah about what you bring to the table. I'm be very clear. You could not be at home and be with me. It's just I'm just not gonna do it. I'm just, because at that point, first of all, I need you to come up with a certain level of academia, and at that point, you went to school and do all that, and you didn't get no job. That's not gonna make sense to me. That doesn't make sense to me. So that's just me. It just don't make sense. But what I'm saying to say is that most men, we care about the peace. We care about the compassion. We care about you not jumping to conclusions. We care about you being loving. We care about you being kind. We care about you being. So when we say that, are you if you lead with that and you say, I bring that to the table, oh shoot, now we talking. Okay, game on. Like I'm hearing you all talk. As I'm hearing you all talk today, I tend to I do a lot of self-work. When I hear that from a woman, you do self-work. Shoot,
that's an anomaly.
You're bringing something to the table. Makes sense. But when you lead that discussion with, I own my own this, I own my this, and for most men, that just doesn't have a place in us. Which is why I shy away from the question, but to Dr. Tony's point, and I was going to end with this point, my last thing today anyway. I understand where that statement comes from, and I also understand this is not an opinion; it's a fact. Men are to blame for that. Period. It's not debatable. It's indisputable. Men are to blame for the way we've oppressed women for centuries, just like white people are to blame for the way they oppressed black people for centuries. It doesn't mean everything black people do is right, but there's a causality. And so I understand the causality of where the statement comes from. It is men's fault and men's fault alone, because had women been equal, we wouldn't need equity. but they haven't been.
I agree that it's men's fault, but I think the other side of this coin, which we don't have the time to go into all of this today, we have to bring y'all back or something. But the other side of this coin is, what will this narrative become? Especially with the lack of communication that already occurs, in which we've had to unpack for the past hour and a half. If we're not taking the time to unravel what these things even mean, and everybody has their own interpretation of it, and then my daughters are looking to get married to somebody and they don't even know what to look for, because they're like, well, I got my own table, I think. I'm the whole table, I think. Like, they don't even know why or what the table is, or who's the table, what's the man supposed to bring. Yeah. And I think just as equally, we are diminishing the role of the black man too sometimes. It may be a secondary conversation to this conversation, but we are diminishing to some degree what the man can bring and provide when we create a narrative like, well, I don't need a man. You know, what do I need a man for? I think, and I've had that thought about, I don't need a woman. I've had that thought, you know, a bunch of times where I say I don't need a woman. I don't know how true those thoughts are. And I think regulating those conversations through these type of endeavors is a start, right? Like, do I need a woman? I don't know. Depends on what we're saying the table is. Is the table you bringing your finances and your accolades and your business stuff to the conversation, or is it the intangibles that Terrence was kind of speaking of I'm kind, I work on myself, I look at, I have self-awareness, and I do have some value systems here and there. Like, those things matter, like, too, right? So I think the conversation is so layered. It's so layered, and I think what I want to be careful of as we keep going in this whole world of like craziness is not allowing things to just be spewed out, and we're like, oh yes, sis, and we all have different. We look at the same quote or the same statement on social media, but everybody has a different perspective of the same exact thing, and we're all saying yes, sis, from totally different vantage points and totally different thought processes, right? All those things really, really matter. Is that a fair? Thought we can agree on. Okay, go ahead, Mike. You had the last word.
So I would like to think, or I would like to see that the narrative changes at some point. Like, there's a time and place for everything, right? So I get women being like, I am the table type thing in reference to like self-growth, the accolades, all those different things. But when you talk about relationship status, those tables go out the window. We're building a whole nother table. So what do you like bring to that table that we are collectively sitting at? Like with the example that Angie gave, as far as like, okay, pulling up a seat to the table with, you know, you CEO, I'm CEO, like let's do this thing. Mm-hmm. But as individuals, yeah, you can have your own table. That's all good. I think of it as like picnic tables, or like if you had a cookout or something like that, and you got 4 people at one table, but okay, we got more people coming. Let's join these tables together so we can all have a seat. And it turns into a whole nother table, right? It changes the dynamics of the table. So I think, like I said, having individual tables is cool, but once it comes to like building a relationship, that's a whole nother table, a whole nother foundation, a whole nother grounding that we're starting with together.
Yeah. Yes, this has been a very great conversation. There's so much, like we said, layered depth to these type of things, and I appreciate BGSO, Black Girl Sound Off. Is that correct?
Brown Girl Sound Off.
Brown Girl Sound. I knew I was close, man. I didn't want to mess it up, but Brown Girl Sound Off. They have a podcast. Dr. Tony, Edwina, and Nafisa. I said it right, Nafisa?
You did.
All right. Have a podcast together. So take some time to check out their podcast. It's on YouTube. I've had a chance to check out some episodes. Actually, Thanos was actually on one of those episodes. That fool was on there. For whatever reason, they decided to bring him on. Angie, I don't know why they brought him on. Thank you so much for joining the podcast with us as well. Your views and vantage point was very much appreciated. All of your views and vantage points was like, it was awesome because it really provided some sense of depth to the conversation that we could never have brought. We were all men. Absolutely. We all think kind of the same way. And so having all of your all thought processes and the way you think about things and your perspectives, it really provided a good sense of conversation. Do you guys have anything last that you want to say?
No, just thanks for having us, and thanks for providing this platform for us to do just what we did, be in community and engage in conversation.
Love it.
Yeah,
anyone
you.
else? Perfect. Thank y'all so much. Listen, guys, thank y'all for checking out the podcast. Check out Brown Girl Sound Off. Check out Relentlessly Real Podcast, of course.
And the Narrow Road Podcast. I meant to say, John, I checked out snippets. Fire. So please check out John's new podcast, the Narrow Road Podcast. It's dope. Dope.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I just started a new podcast called the Narrow Road Podcast. And it's on YouTube. It's on all platforms where podcasts exist. We appreciate you guys' support. As always, we love you. God bless.